You're listening to Central Florida Seen and Heard, Rising Water, Part 2. I'm Molly Duerig, Central Florida Public Media's environment reporter. This is the first episode of a special podcast expanding on our team's in-depth reporting on the complexities of water management in a quickly changing Central Florida. I'll be guiding you along the way as we dig for answers to our questions about flooding, water quality, and other water issues with big impacts for Central Florida, including the region's resilience to storms scientists expect will just keep getting stronger. Earlier this year, we took an in-depth look at stronger storms, flooding, and rising sea levels across Central Florida, and the impacts on people who call this region home.
We are devastated. We can clean up this time, but is it going to do it every single time? We can't sustain that.
Months ago, officials with the National Atmospheric and Oceanic Administration predicted this year's hurricane season would be, quote, extraordinary. In the spring, NOAA released the agency's highest ever storm forecast issued in May. In early October, Hurricane Milton flooded homes and communities in parts of Central Florida. This first episode of our podcast picks up almost exactly 2 weeks out from when Hurricane Milton hit Florida's west coast as a deadly Category 3 storm and then traveled across the state.
A weakening Milton continues to produce widespread impacts across the state of Florida. That's the headline this hour. I'm meteorologist Megan Borowski from the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network.
Milton lost strength before reaching Central Florida, but the National Weather Service says it still caused a lot of damage in the region, including at least 19 confirmed tornadoes, hurricane-force winds, and then the flooding. In some parts of Volusia County, Milton dropped more than 15 inches of rain. County resident Claire Venables lives near Spruce Creek.
We started seeing trickles of water coming in. It felt as though once the water had come in one direction, it started to come in literally every direction.
We spoke with Venables as Milton was crossing over Central Florida. She and her family faced a similar fate 2 years ago after being flooded by Hurricane Ian and just recently finished picking up the pieces.
I've been in my house for 2 months after I finally finished affording to build back my house after the Hurricane Ian, and now it's destroyed to worse levels.
Venables has an online fundraising campaign to help the family of 4 and their 3 dogs recover. But she says you can't put a price on the worst damage. The baby photo books that Venables made for her 2 teenagers made it through Ian, but the books didn't survive Milton. About 40 miles northwest of Venables, on the border of Lake and Volusia Counties, there's still major flooding 4 days after the storm. In the small town of Astor, one flooded street is nearly impassable, with any cars rolling through here kicking up a small wake.
Go slow, please. Go slow. This is the worst one. The water has never been up so high as to be near the back of the house like it is now.
That's Rich Williams, who says he's lived in the neighborhood about 13 years.
I mean, it's literally right there, ready to come in the house.
But inside, Williams and his neighbors say it wasn't exactly the river flooding their homes.
The problem we had here was sewage water coming in the house from under the toilets.
We'll be getting more into that rising water issue in another episode of this podcast. The St. Johns River in Williams's backyard is Florida's longest river, at just over 300 miles. It flows north, which isn't anything strange. Many rivers around the world do. Like anything else, rivers flow downhill, chasing the path of least resistance and gravity. That gravity is key to whether and where the river floods. Tim Miller is with the St. Johns River Water Management District.
As we go north in our system, there really isn't a whole lot of topographical relief there. The elevations don't change a lot, so the flow of the river really isn't that fast.
Here in Astor, the St. Johns gets really narrow before opening back up into Lake George, meaning here the river becomes sort of like a bottleneck, restricting water flow and causing flooding concerns for nearby communities, like this one, where Williams lives.
Well, that's one of the perils of living on the water, I mean, especially on low ground. Like, we're in a flood zone here, and we know it. So, we choose to live here. That's the thing.
To say hurricanes are a hefty challenge would be putting it lightly. Each difficult task involved with storm preparation and resilience quickly multiplies into layers of new tasks, questions, and concerns, which officials charged with protecting communities have to juggle. Take shelter and evacuation route prep. What about language barriers with those? That's a real concern in Florida, where 570,000 households speak limited English. Here in Central Florida, the Hope Community Center's Felipe Sosa Lazaballet sees the impacts of language barriers playing out in real time, including with Hurricane Ian.
Our community, mostly immigrants, did not know the information. Perhaps even didn't know that there was a hurricane coming.
And how do unhoused people prepare for a hurricane? In East Orange County, where outreach workers say emergency shelters are scarce, flash flooding from Milton forced out dozens of people from the camping area where they lived. Local nonprofits say they rescued 35 unhoused people, like Tony Peters, who says he lost tents, tools, even solar panels to the storm.
Even though we was homeless, that was our home. You know? It's no different than having a house and seeing it gone. Same feeling. I'm not sure exactly what the next step is right now. I don't know.
Early damage estimates are in the billions, but Federal Emergency Management Agency Administrator Deanne Criswell says billions are also going to recovery efforts.
We've already obligated over $5.4 billion across all of the 6 states impacted by Helene and Milton. And these spending levels, they are historic, and they are currently outpacing other events that we've had, including Hurricane Ian a few years ago.
If you go to cfpublic.org, you can check out so much more of our team's ongoing storm coverage and our in-depth reporting project, Central Florida Seen and Heard, Rising Water, Part 1. This podcast is Part 2, and I hope you'll stay tuned as we continue exploring how Central Florida is tackling the most complicated hurricane challenge of all, water management. Next episode, we look at how new development is changing the way water flows and floods in Central Florida. Our podcast is produced by Central Florida Public Media with assistance from our news director, Latoya Dennis, assistant news director, Brendan Byrne, and digital director, Ryan Ellison. I'm Molly Duerig. Talk with you soon.